everyone, I'm your host, Robbie Strazynski, and thanks so much for joining us on episode number 21 of CardsChat, the friendliest poker podcast in town. On this episode, we have the pleasure of welcoming Kara Scott. A longtime veteran in poker broadcasting, presenting, and hosting, Kara has also represented numerous brands as an ambassador. What's certain is that no matter what camera she's in front of, patch she's sporting, or microphone she holds, she's always a wonderful representative for our game. Today, we'll get to know her a little better. Kara, it's a pleasure to see you again and speak with you. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, thank you. It's really nice to be here. I'm very happy to be here.
Good. Well, welcome to the CardsChat podcast. The last time I saw you was in February of 2020 in Madrid at the 888 Poker Live event, which seems like years ago. The last time I interviewed you was a little bit before that. It was about a year and a half ago. You were just ending your maternity leave and you were planning to return to poker, to return to broadcasting, and you did so for a few months. So that happened, and then, the world kind of turned on its head. So before we get into anything pandemic related, tell us a little bit about sort of your return, your reemergence into poker, what you were doing for those few months after maternity leave until things went haywire.
It was an amazing few months, I'll be honest. It felt so good to be back on the road. I was back on the road with 888 Poker, representing the brand, playing poker, and it was amazing. I think the first tournament that I did, because I actually spent a full year of my daughter's life at home with her, plus some of because I couldn't travel a little bit right before she was born, so some of that as well. So I hadn't been doing anything, and it was hard because I'm a person who's always done things. I've always worked. I've always worked, and I've always worked as hard as I could too. So that was weird. As soon as she had her first birthday, literally the next day, I flew to Barcelona. Yay! So I was playing in Barcelona. I think it was Barcelona at an 888 live event, and I actually won the ladies event there. And I was like, this is awesome. Poker is so good to me. And it just was like from there, I got to do a few different events. And then I was in Madrid, like that you mentioned, in February, and we were looking forward to this whole year that was going to be amazing. Like my husband and I had worked out, he was going to have extra help. We were hiring help so that I could travel and I could go and do these things, and it was going to be easier for him. And we just had this great plan, and then
certainly. It's like, you plan, of course I'm going to win the tournament, and then you just can't catch any cards. I understand what you mean. Well, for most of the world, things really started changing around March 2020, but for you, it was slightly earlier because you live in Italy, and, outside of China, that was really the first place, in the world that was really strongly hit. Was it kind of surreal for you having your life change sort of so starkly before it happened in the rest of the world?
Yeah, it was very strange. I'll be honest, I wasn't watching the news from China very closely, but my husband was. Yeah, exactly. Well, my husband was. Giovanni, his name is, and he was. And I mean, these are the kinds of things that he does keep an eye on. And he's in a lot of chat groups with very smart people and a lot of people who work in medicine as well, and epidemiology and all kinds of things. And he was the one who didn't want to feel like he was being crazy. But he said to me a couple of times, he was like, this is just something I think we need to keep an eye on. I think we need to, watch out for. Our daughter has chronic pulmonary issues as well. So it was something particularly to, keep an eye on. And we'd just actually been in hospital with her. Might've been COVID, actually, now that we think of it. Who knows? Sorry, someone's at the door. I'm not going to get it.
It's okay.
Okay.
This is live. Well, it's not live, but yeah.
Sorry.
All good.
It's apparently another package arriving. That's how we live now. So he was the one that was keeping an eye on it, and he was saying we should, talk about this. And then we did a little bit. And then one afternoon, when our daughter was napping, we were just chatting back and forth, and we were like, should we just drive 10 hours down to the family farm? Because we just both feel a little weird. And there were no big warning signs or anything. We were like, you know what? Why not? We'll go and spend some of the winter on the family farm. We'll just spend a few weeks there, see what's
Wow,
happening.
so that was planned. Okay.
Yeah. So we got in the car as soon as she woke up and we drove all the way down there. And we found out on the way down that they were starting to do temperature checks leaving the city.
Wow.
And we're like, this is weird, because this was not happening anywhere else in the world at the time. And even that just felt weird, like, because there was no warning. It wasn't like, this is a big problem. It was like, oh, they're stopping cars.
Yeah.
We have just gone through. I mean, we weren't trying to get out of a hot zone or anything. We didn't realize. So we ended up at the farm for 7 months instead of a couple of weeks. And it was pretty wild. Yeah, because I mean, we didn't have proper Wi-Fi. It was, a lot of things were quite difficult, but we were super lucky to have the family farm. Like, I'm never going to look that gift horse in the mouth. And it was great. Our kid could run around and be outside. And I just kept watching everyone, especially in the States, going, oh my gosh, how are you coping? And I was like, this is going to be you. Like, you're only a few weeks behind us. And I kept trying to tell people, and it seemed alarmist.
Right.
And I did get called alarmist, actually.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to be that person, but you need to start preparing. And thankfully, my family are very prepared for this kind of thing. We grew up with this sort of, idea that this is probably going to happen. So they were completely ready for lockdown as soon as it happened. But everyone else was like, this is ridiculous thing that's happening to you. And I was like, I know, this is a pandemic.
Right. Well, because hindsight, of course, is 2020. Again, no pun not intended, but genuinely not intended. But like, when you said temperature checks, like, yeah, that's a standard part of our daily lexicon now, but that was a very strange, that's abnormal. And we have to remember that is an abnormal thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, so you had all these big plans, and all of a sudden you find yourself living on a farm for 7 months. Like, how does, what's your day-to-day life like?
Well, that was pretty strange too, because we were in the big house, the farmhouse that belongs to the family. So my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, and then they had a staff there as well. And it's a massive farm. So they have a lot of farmers working there, obviously, as well as people working in the house. And when March hit and it looked like there was going to be an actual lockdown, and we realized that we had a higher risk profile because of our daughter.
Sure.
And it was really important she didn't get sick with a pulmonary disease.
Of course.
Also, we were considered to be alarmist, even there. Like, we were doing things and acting in ways that people were like, whoa, now you're being crazy. And we're like, well, actually, this is kind of a bigger deal than people want to accept. And I think we accepted it before they did. So we ended up asking an uncle who had an apartment on the top floor of the house if we could move up there, because he wasn't there. His whole family was in the city. And they said yes, and we did. And we did that for a few months. And we actually completely just a bubble of 3, even away from the rest of the family, because they were doing things that we were like understandably, you guys have other, girlfriend who has kids, who's going out to see her friends. And so we just aren't comfortable with that level of risk because, so we did that as long as we could. And then it was May, I think. And we were like, we've got to relax because we're going to lose our minds. And it was going to be a birthday for my daughter. So we let it relax a little bit. And then it was this summer and everybody in Calabria was like, it's not a problem. The sun will take care of it. Like, oh, you people, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
So we had to get closed again because people were in and out of the house and traveling and everybody was coming to visit. And they shot this massive commercial right there on the farmhouse grounds.
I remember you tweeted about
seriously?
that. Right.
Yeah. It was like an entire film crew for 3 days.
It's Old MacDonald, the movie. Right. Okay.
Yeah, it was bizarre. So we closed again. And then finally in September, we were able to come back to the city as we were starting to lose it a little bit. And so now we're back here.
Wow. My goodness. And you're in Padua, right?
Padua.
Padua. Huh.
Yeah.
So, someone who's in Italy, and I got to ask, how authentic are the canals at the Venetian?
You know what? The color is spot on. They do an amazing job of that. So they don't smell the same, but yeah.
Right. Well, I guess I imagine you must be happy to be back in your own home, creature comforts, that sort of a thing. It's better.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, it's also, I mean, it was expensive because we kind of had to set up another home after we'd been in the uncle's apartment. They were obviously going to come back for the summer. So we had to get out. And so we renovated like an area of the farm to move into, but then we
Right.
had to outfit it as a house. So it
Right.
was expensive too. Like it was a really expensive year in terms of that.
Sure.
And so coming back was really nice because we have all of our things here, all of her toys, clothes, like just everything is here. My stuff, like we went from a 2-week suitcase in February to spending the entire summer in a place that is super duper hot. Like it's ridiculously hot there.
Right.
So coming home was nice. Being able to have our things was nice. Being able to have internet
Yeah.
access was
That was a
great
big deal, right?
for sure. Because I mean, I couldn't really speak to my parents very well.
Oh.
It was quite difficult, like having family contact. All of my people are, overseas basically.
Yeah.
So having all that back was really nice. But there is the problem in this place of it's a beautiful old house. I'm in the attic where my office is, but the pipes are terrible. So water, sewer, gas, heating. The heating has gone out multiple times this winter. It's freezing cold
I
when
see
it goes out.
Murphy lives with you, right? So
It's terrible. We lost our hot water for like almost 10 days before Christmas and the heat at the same time. So we didn't have heat or hot water. And then the power went out in the whole block for a day and a half or a day. It went out for a day. And that was how we were staying warm was space heaters. So we're just like,
Right.
I don't know what to do now.
Right.
And we just kind of have to keep rolling with it. Like we had all the gas turned off because we had 2 massive gas leaks. And we had to have the fire department here at 2 a.m. So all the gas in the building's turned off, which means we don't have a stove and haven't for almost 3 months now. We've been using hot plates.
Wow.
So
do you miss the farm?
Now I do. I actually do. I was so happy to be here. And I am so happy to be here.
Sure.
But I do actually miss the farm. And now, there's a travel ban and it wouldn't be sensible for us to go.
Goodness.
So
It's funny, like the grass is always greener somewhere, right?
yeah, seriously.
Again,
and that
not
wasn't even the
intended.
worst bit of it. So
Wow. Well,
we had a biohazard in the kitchen at one point because it was infested because we'd been away for so long. A pigeon had made its nest in the window in the kitchen.
Wow.
But in a way that you couldn't see it because it was tucked around the corner. And so when the baby birds hatched and flew away and the nest was empty, the mites that infest pigeons came inside and infested me.
That is
personally because they were
crazy.
biting me. It was the most awful, revolting thing. So we had to have like biohazard people come because it was when we could see around the corner, we could see it was this big nest full of disgusting pigeon poop, which is really dangerous. Cleaned out and sanitized properly. And then thankfully after the nest was removed, 10 days later, all the mites die and I was no longer infested. So, But it was only me. It was only me, which is good because I'm glad it wasn't my kid. But I was just like, what?
Wow.
What universe? What?
Right.
It's been a difficult year, Robbie. I'm not gonna lie.
It's just like, and you're still smiling. Again, it's behind you, but it's testament to your character. I'm really not trying to, be facetious or anything. It's not an easy thing to smile through it and smile afterward. And, memories that you don't, you kind of want to repress. You don't want Facebook or Google's like, let's remember this day. No, I understand that.
Man.
On more of a positive side, perhaps, so we'll see how you respond to this question. When we spoke to Chris Moneymaker recently on episode number 15, he talked about how much joy that he had taken in the ability to spend so much time with his family during the pandemic. To what degree have you been enjoying the extra time that you've had with Giovanni and with your daughter Ella?
Well, to be honest, we always have kind of been at home together anyways, except for like I might travel for a week, a few times a year, and that's it. So we were pretty much always together anyways. It's just now, we just don't really have any extra help. So unfortunately, a lot of that falls on me, which kind of takes away from the joy of that. I'll be honest. Like, my husband herniated his back in the spring very, very badly. And so that kind of removed his ability to do a lot of things. So like domestically. So that's all on me. That's kind of a lot. And that's been difficult, honestly. I would love to be able to kind of revel in the time, but I am exhausted.
Yeah.
quite
Well, that's
frankly,
legit.
I'm exhausted. Yeah.
There's no bonus points anyone gets for whitewashing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's real. I got 3 kids. I remember times like that myself when
Yeah.
either myself or my wife was out of commission. It by definition does put the load on the other spouse's shoulders. And we live in this kind of Instagrammy world where everything's perfect. It ain't.
Yeah.
It
And
very
I'm
much
guilty
ain't.
of that myself too. Because I
Mhm.
mean, I did one of the things I was able to do for myself and needed to be just for me
Mhm.
was I put a lot more effort into I was trying to do a self-portrait project for
Oh,
2020. And that was nice, especially on the farm because there's beautiful spots. So like once a week, I might be able to run out for a couple of hours and I just would take a ton of photos in as many locations as I could. And I was working on like the remote shutter and trying to figure out all kinds of composition ideas and whatever. And that was really nice. But yeah, if you looked at my Instagram, you'd be like, wow, she's so having an amazing time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm infested.
wow.
But okay, it looks nice. So yeah,
Right.
I can hear what you're saying.
Right. Well, one thing that's sort of relatively new, I guess, on the professional front is the really cool podcast, The Heart of
Oh,
Poker, which we'll talk about a little bit later
cool.
in this show. It's a great show, and I
Thanks.
personally enjoy it. Um,
Yay.
Besides that, another thing you also did on behalf of 888 Poker, you did these WSOP interviews with those
Oh
who made the
yeah.
final table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between those two things, and like you said, on Instagram and on Twitter, great follow, by the way, Kara OTR, you got to follow
Thank
her.
you.
It's good stuff. So you've been keeping yourself in the public eye with
Yeah.
all of this stuff going on. People are still aware. You're still, part of the poker community, part of the
Oh,
poker world. Many of us have been forced to pivot in this
yeah.
very
Yeah.
strange time. How have you found yourself pivoting professionally without, your regular gigs to do?
Yeah. That was tough actually because I also just didn't have the time and
Mm,
quite frankly like the mental energy to be able to do a lot of the things that I would have liked to do. So yeah, I I did some Instagram live interviews early on when we were in the lockdown upstairs on the farm, and that was really nice. And I tried to make sure that I was doing some interviews and whatnot. But it quickly, I would run out of time and energy just being kind of exhausted.
right.
So I was really happy that I was able to do the podcast. That was for me fantastic. Like it gave me a reason to reach out to people and then there'd always end up being a kind of a conversation or a chat before or after. And that was a really nice way of staying in touch with people. It was tough because of the internet problem. So I was usually hotspotting off my phone or trying to like piggyback off the office in the farm, but that was kind of far away. And so I would literally be in one of the bathrooms because that was the closest room to the farm office. So I'd have the laptop set up on the toilet and I'd be trying to do, and thankfully it was an audio podcast. It wasn't the best sound quality. And I'd be sitting in this bathroom with my because I brought my stuff with me. And I was like, trying to do this podcast. So pivoting was basically just trying to figure out how to create content. Like, how on earth do I do it? And then, did a few videos for them when I came back, which was really nice.
Mhm.
And I would just do kind of, like handheld or with the equipment that I bought for my self-portrait
Right.
project, just doing stuff on the stairs at the farm and like talking
Wow.
about poker, or talking about the latest update that they brought out and that kind of thing.
Right.
But
Yeah, it's some pretty
unfortunately,
punny
there
stuff.
wasn't
I remember
time for
that.
anything else.
Right.
Yeah. But the farm dogs would never let me do anything. So as soon as I'd start filming, they'd like all run up the stairs and like jump on me. I was just like, oh my God.
Wow. It's
Which
funny.
was funny. It was funny. It was funny.
And it's funny to hear because again, so often, when you're a regular recreational consumer of poker content, you just sort of see what's there on the surface. And I hope
Right.
that everyone, this is, by request, you guys here at CardsChat wanted Kara on, and now you get to see the behind the scenes stuff. I find it interesting. It's funny. It's very real. It's, it's very relatable.
Well, that's good.
People say also look, we're not in the bathroom, but you don't realize what the rest of this room looks like. It's
Yeah,
not
this is a
pretty.
mess. I just realized what a mess this is. I'm sorry.
I wish my room could look that messy, Karen.
Uh,
So So we know what's up with you now. It's important in poker. We got to change gears. So let's turn back the clock
Yes,
a
let's
little
do
bit.
it.
A lot of our listeners, of course, know you from your work at the World Series of Poker, but our crack research team, shout out to my man, Mike Patrick, he put forth this interesting nugget. You used to be involved with the World Series of Backgammon.
Yes, I did.
So
Yeah, I did actually.
right. So a couple of your first gigs were hosting Poker Night Live and
Yes,
Gammon Night Live. Tell us
that's
about
right.
that. That's interesting.
That was incredibly fun. I played poker as a kid, but never Texas Hold'em. So when I kind of heard about, let's see, what was I doing? How did that even work? I started on backgammon. I just went for the job actually. And I'd been trying to get work in television when I lived in London, and I was working as a substitute teacher on the side and just really grinding, trying to get anything I could, trying to like kind of make it and figure out how I was going to work in television. And this was my last audition. I told myself this backgammon thing. It was the last one I was going to do because you know what? I was broke, I was disheartened, and I was just like, I got to be sensible, and I'm going to go and get a permanent teaching job again and just go back to teaching. Then I did this interview, and I, in my mind, thought it had gone terribly because it didn't go as well as I'd wanted it to go. And apparently they loved me, which was awesome, but I thought it was terrible. So I remember leaving and going down the stairs. It was in Soho in London. And I went across the street to a bar, and I had a glass of whiskey, and I was so upset that my hand was shaking, and I chipped a tooth, and I was just like, ah. And it was fine. It was only a small chip. And then I found out a couple of weeks later I'd gotten the job. And that was the job that changed everything for me, because this Poker Night Live company saw the work that I did on the backgammon show and asked me to come in. They wanted me to be the novice, the voice of the novice, asking all the questions of a novice, which was perfect. And that's where I started playing poker. And then I went from that to I kind of hopped around to lots of different poker companies. But without that backgammon job, never would have happened.
I didn't even know there was a World Series. Is that still a thing? A World Series of backgammon?
Yeah, I mean, not now, and I'm not sure when the last one they ran was. I actually played in the World Series doubles with Paul McGreal.
Oh,
10K buy-in, I think that was, like, madness. Obviously, I didn't make any decisions. He did everything, and I just rolled, but it was still fun because I was really new at the time, and he was my co-commentator on the World Series of backgammon. So
that is fabulous. I don't know if you saw, I don't know, maybe you got to share a screen, because that's actually my next question. Because I'll just read it off just to prove. One of the people you worked with on those backgammon show was a man many players may be familiar with, Paul McGreal.
Quack, quack.
In his TV poker, quack quack X22, right? I remember that. In his TV poker appearances, he was quite the character. Do you have a good story to share, perhaps, about your behind the scenes working with Paul?
Yeah, Paul would be incredibly focused. He was so focused on whatever he was doing that everything else would kind of like fade away. And I remember being in the booth with him. We were doing live commentary, watching a match that was happening in another room. And we had these, cans on, like the big, headphones with the little thing, the microphone. And we had one side off so we could hear each other as well as hearing what was happening. And he just didn't notice. And as he was moving around, he was being very animated and everything. His were like slowly doing this, like literally. So I remember the director was like, I can't hear anything he's saying because his microphone is like all the way back here. It was literally in the middle of his forehead at one point. And I was just like, Paul, I think you're going to have to, can we reset everyone? Right. He was just so focused. But yeah, he used to tell me some pretty interesting stories too. He told me the story of how he left, like, I forget how much it was, maybe 60K in a bag in a taxi. He was like, well, that's what happens sometimes. I was like, well, it's never happened to me, Paul. Right. Never. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot.
He was a character.
Those backgammon dollars or poker dollars, you think?
I don't know, man. He was such a shark at backgammon. There was a lot of money in it.
Yeah. For sure. Well, like I said, people have known you for, it's long. It's got to be at least 15 years you've been in the poker industry. From your perspective, you've been since then and continuously, you're still involved in poker today. What would you say, I guess, as far as everything that you've witnessed, what do you think has changed as far as the production of televised poker? I mean, you started out, I think also you did Sky Poker, and you had EPT when you first came to prominence. And things are a little bit different now, or maybe perhaps on the back end there's the same. What's your perspective on that?
Well, it was really interesting to go from European poker to American poker. That was much bigger difference for me, because I played a lot of the like the six-seater table shootout style that were on TV all the time in England. And we used to do Matchroom Sports, was the company that filmed all of these. And a lot of the people that worked there became friends of mine. And I worked with them for a lot of like WPT things as well when I did the European WPT circuit. And that was like the cards on the table on the glass. So the camera was like looking up at it. So there was nothing was chipped. It was just literally, you could see through the camera shot sometimes as well. If you're leaning over, like you could see right at people's noses. And that was pretty funny. And just the kind of going from that to starting to work for Maury Eskandani and Poker Productions. My first job with them was actually the World Series of Poker Europe. And just watching how different everything was incredible for me. American television, especially then before Black Friday, had a lot more money put into it, a lot more money than European poker and television did. So just the level of everything was incredible. And they taught me so much. And then I went on to work with them at High Stakes Poker as well, which was such a thrill. And doing American television is just bigger. So the poker was bigger, honestly. Yeah.
And in terms of like back then versus now, is it sort of the same, or has there been sort of a little bit perhaps of an evolution in maybe technology or style?
I'm guessing there's been a lot of evolution in terms of technology. My microphone looks the same. So on my end of things, not so much. But yeah, it's kind of hard to know if the technology itself was changing, but as my role was changing through it, it was, I was just seeing more of it. Like when I went from being a sideline reporter to also being the anchor at the break desk, that my role just kept changing so much that my view of it was constantly changing. And I really don't know if that was the poker television itself, or because we were always trying to innovate. We were always trying, like even the break desk itself was trying to innovate and bring something new to it. I think the first year we did it, it was Olivier Bousquet and I on stools just off the side to the side of the set. And now we have this massive, wonderful production with the break desk. So yeah, I don't know. I think it has changed, but it just kind of continues to change through. And we always go back to the basics of, this is the game of cards and we want to know about the people, but mostly we want to watch the cards. So
sure. And when you say innovation, because you've been involved for so long, you can have some creative license with what you do. I wonder, do you sort of really come up with things perhaps on your own, or do you maybe take inspiration from other sorts of break desk and sideline reporting of other sports or other sorts of live events?
I'm lucky I get to work with some pretty amazing people. My producer, director, when I'm working with ESPN and Poker Central as well, is a guy named Dan Gotti. And Dan is awesome. He's the best. And he's the voice in my head all the time. Like I've got him in my ear. So when we're doing live TV, he will feed me things that he thinks is relevant. He has a lot more of a varied sports background than I do. I worked in sports television before poker, but it was all fight sports. And he's got a much wider look at it. So he kind of gave me some different cadences and some different phraseology. And, he's worked with me on that all the way through, but especially at the beginning, just so that it looked a bit more sports-like, I think is what he was kind of going for. And I've always been really grateful to him for that. So
one of poker broadcasting's unsung heroes. Is a great, wonderful guy. I've worked with him as well. Well, the first time you appeared on camera, at least for poker lenses that I'm aware of, maybe it was before it, but the first time I remember was 2008 during the WSOP main event, not as a host, but as a player. So we've got a two-part question here. How did it feel to be on camera as a player for the first time rather than a host? And number two, did you know Norman Chad before that run? Because according to Wikipedia, Kara Scott Chad is still listed as one of your nicknames.
Yeah, I am never, ever going to get rid of that nickname ever. So I didn't know Norman before, ever. I'd never met him. Obviously, I wouldn't have even known where we'd meet.
Uh,
But he and Lon are friends now. I've actually stayed at Norman's house, which is
oh,
pretty funny. And he drove me to the airport the next day. His wife is a very good friend of mine. She's been to visit me in Slovenia and Italy.
my
So, and I
goodness.
know, yeah, her daughter. So we're
Tony,
actually quite
right?
close. Yeah, Tony.
Tony.
Wonderful. I love Tony. She's a really, really dear friend of mine. And he introduced us specifically knowing that we would get on really well. And he was totally right. And Lon is a great friend of mine as well. We speak a lot. Like actually, every week we're messaging back and forth, and he means a lot to me as well. He came out to visit my baby when she was born and everything, all the way to Slovenia.
Beautiful.
So yeah. See, I'm gonna have forgotten your question now. Oh yeah, the first time on TV for
Yeah.
poker, it wasn't actually, because I did
Okay.
British poker TV first. I made the final table of the World Women's
Oh,
Open.
okay.
Yeah, so that was really fun, but it was a very different setup. It was a shootout style, single table, cards on the table, glass, the whole thing. And so being at the World Series of Poker was terrifying. I was way over my head. I hadn't been playing properly for that long, and I was just having an amazing time. Like I had the best time, and every day I'd bag chips and I was just like, this is awesome.
Yep.
And being on the feature table was terrifying because I really did have a chip on my shoulder, and still do a little bit, about not being as good as I'd want to be. I hadn't had enough time to put the work into my game, and I was still figuring things out, and I was worried about looking silly. And but mostly I was just exhausted because I'd never played poker for 5 days in a row, 12 plus hours a day like that. It
Yep.
was intense. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, you've got tons more table experience now, and just to make you feel completely relaxed, you're speaking to someone who has yet to record his own first Hendon Mob results. So it's all good.
I hear
I'm a
you,
cash game
man.
player. That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why.
It's what I always assume when I don't see the Hendon mob.
There
So
you
yeah.
go. So for those who don't know, of course, Kara, you look at her Hendon Mob, she's got over $660,000 in career tournament winnings. Certainly no slouch. Your biggest score was back in 2009 at the Irish Open for $413,000. You were the runner-up out of 700 players. Take
Yeah.
us through that experience.
That was pretty incredible. It was the last bit I think I had in a sponsorship deal I've been trying to use up, and I was worried that the money would actually not get used, and I've been pushing. And they
Huh.
said, okay, fine, you can go and play the Irish Open. And my partner at the time was playing it. He'd been invited to go as like a special guest. So he had a room where I could stay, and that was great. So I was playing, I had a great time. And then I think early-ish on, I was fairly near the bubble, and I made a ridiculous move that was just like a multi-street bluff that almost worked because he did pause before he called me. And I got left with, I think, 2.5 big blinds.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And we weren't even in the money yet, I don't think. It was a little, I was sheepish as well because it was a big bluff. There was like complete air, which you're not supposed to do.
Right.
So I somehow managed to get back from 2.5 big blinds all the way up to the final table. I made it through, which was televised, and it was live as well. The next day I was at the airport in Dublin trying to fly home, and people had seen it, and they were like,
That's
oh my
so
God, you're
cool.
that girl who did that thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I was, because it was incredible. And then, yeah, the final table was a lot of fun. Will Kassouf, I was trying to think of his name, was there as well. That's where I first met Will Kassouf.
Yeah.
And a few other people as well, obviously. And yeah, it was good fun. And I didn't deserve to win. I would have loved to have won. I really would have. It was double the amount that I won for first prize. So
those
it
are
would have been amazing.
2009 structures were very different.
Yeah,
and also, like you said, for like the fact that you were recognized the next day at the airport, I don't know that would necessarily happen now.
Right.
It's a very different time, 2009. I mean, you mentioned something about sponsorship money. Maybe that kind of, I'm not sure, dovetails into this question. You said that it's not like you were a professional player or, making your bread and butter, playing poker. I noticed that you cashed in the main event at the WSOP in both 2008 and 2009. And I'm kind of, asking, for most people playing in the main event, a 10K is a bucket list event. Did you satellite in? Was that sponsored? Or like, how did that work?
Well, it's actually a bit of a story. So the first year I was sponsored, it was part of the income of a deal when I was working for the EPT. I would get straight income, but then there was a portion that would go to buy-ins, and that was one of them. So
Cool.
I worked for it, but yeah, I was bought in. The second year, I was in negotiations with them about my contract moving forward, and it wasn't going very well. It was actually an extremely frustrating process. And they just kind of left me hanging up until the main event was about to start. I know. And I was like, you guys were that was supposed to be my buy-in. And this is feeling a little, and I decided I'd won so much the year before. And I was not the smartest person with my money at the time either. I was just like, well, I've got lots of money now. I grew up without a lot of money. So I was just like, so I sent a message and said, look, we're going to pause it and I'm just going to play on my own, but I'm not going to wear a patch, which I did. And somehow I managed to thankfully get as far almost as I did the year before. Like in terms of time, at least I made it to like dinner break on day 5, which was amazing. I made the money and I was really happy. And then I could go back and talk to them about contracts, which didn't end up working out. But yeah, then the following year I played it for the 3rd time and I was sponsored and I didn't cash, and that was fine. And then I started working there. So I was like, oh, okay. And now I can't play it anymore, but I'm glad I had the 3 years I did.
At any point in time, did you consider going pro or like making your way in the industry as a player, or was it always about, the professional side of things?
No. Yeah. I never thought that I had what it took to go pro. It takes a lot of work, and I could see that. I mean, my job was talking to poker players constantly, being at poker events, seeing who was doing really well, who was getting lucky, and who was doing terribly, and being able to see that extremely hard work was behind most of the success. And I could see that. And I didn't have the time with my broadcasting career to really do that. And I loved my broadcasting career. So I wasn't going to give that up to be pro. But I mean, when I had left one company, I remember there was all these news, like poker news articles, not just poker news, but like different news agencies in poker came out with saying, Kara's going pro, she's left the broadcasting. And I was like, that is just not true. I have never tried to go pro. I have too much respect for the pros.
Wow. That's a great answer. I mean, I do see people who aren't necessarily watching, if you're only listening, you can't see, but over your left shoulder, Kara, I see 2 poker, your left shoulder, the other left, poker chip sets over there, right? How often do you play? Is that like a home game type of setup type thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, because we moved back to Italy kind of right before the pandemic, I didn't really have a chance to do that. And I don't know that many people here, but sure. Yeah. It was something that I used to play, especially when I lived in England. I lived in Brighton, and which I loved and considered my hometown for a really long time. And we used to play a home game. It was so like a 10-pound rebuy or whatever, just something for fun. And it was really just about socializing for me, that part of it. Yeah. And I love having chips around. So.
Right. Well, that's good. Are you always it's always tournaments with you, or do you like also to mix it up with some cash games?
Yeah, I'll play some cash games, but I've never played a ton of it. There was 1 or 2 summers where I was at the World Series where I was kind of grinding pretty low stakes cash in different casinos for the poker room rate, because that makes a big difference. So,
of course.
And that was nice. And it was a nice way to like make a little extra money as well, especially during the World Series where there would be a lot of tourists around.
Right. But
I knew the difference. Thankfully, I had no illusions about my level of skill, and I knew the difference between playing against grinders the rest of the year versus, playing in games where I could see there were a lot of tourists. So,
Well, table selection is always so important. Game selection. I kind of delude myself. I get to go to Las Vegas usually once, maybe twice a year, and it's always around that World Series of Poker time. So to me, that's quote unquote what Vegas games represent. But I know as well, it ain't like that in February. It's not.
That's right. Yeah, the gravy train doesn't run all year round. You just it's very seasonal.
Absolutely. Well, I promised that we would talk about your new podcast, The Heart of Poker. Part of the very unique format is you ask all of your guests a set of questions designed by psychologists. Can you remind me the name of the individual?
Oh my gosh, I don't even remember now. I
Okay.
apologize,
It
but
was
no,
Dr.
it's been too
something.
long. Yeah,
Okay.
it was Dr. Something. And
Okay.
there were actually a lot of them. There is a whole list of names. So
Okay, cool. So, and obviously, the types of questions that you ask lead to some really cool and interesting personal answers. At the time of this recording, you've released 15 episodes, and a couple of my favorites have been with Andrew Nemi and Brad Owen, a couple of wonderful guys.
yay.
And I've spoken to both of them, but then
Mm,
you ask these questions in such a way that you really dig deep. It's fascinating what you can get out of an
cool.
individual. How did you get the idea and the inspiration to do this type of a
Hmm.
format of podcast?
Well, 888 told me, I guess it was last year, the end of the year before, that they wanted me to start doing a podcast. And I was like, oh man, like everything is being done
Mm,
already so well. And I don't want to do a strategy podcast. I don't want it to be straight interviews. People are already doing this. It can't be like the current events unless there's a really interesting spin on it. I don't know.
mm,
And thankfully, 888, we're working with Matt Showell from
okay.
Canadian. Yeah. So if people might not know, because he's a behind the camera kind of guy, but he's responsible for a lot of really great content in poker. And he's Canadian. He's been a friend of mine for a really long time as well. We've worked together lots. And yeah, so working with him was great. And we just started chatting online. And I said, okay, so if we're going to do this podcast and his company was going to edit it, can we just kind of throw ideas back and forth? And he was great for that. And I needed a podcast where I wasn't going to have to put in 10 hours of research for every hour of audio that we put out. Like I
Sure.
just couldn't do that. It was physically not going to be possible for me because of my commitments at home. So I just kind of came upon this idea. It was an article I'd read in the New York Times a while ago about these 36 questions that lead to love. So they
Mm,
asked complete strangers these questions of each other. And the theory was that they would fall in love because of the enhanced intimacy of asking these questions.
right.
And I only really care about the poker players in terms of their person. Like
Mhm.
I like it's interesting with their poker careers and the whole thing, but other people are out there doing those podcasts better than me. Hello, thank you very much. You included. So I don't want to be stepping into like a saturated market where it's already being done well. So I wanted to have this. And if I was asking the same questions or a variety of the same questions, because there's 36, I'm definitely not getting all 36 in
Right.
45 minutes, then that kind of allows me to not have to do as much research into the players, and I can just kind of rely on their life stories and pulling out pieces of that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. It's certainly very unique. And like every podcast, it has to be different in some way, shape, or
Right.
form. And this is certainly exceedingly unique. And,
Right.
everyone who's listening or watching, after you listen to this episode, after you finished all 21 that we've done so far, then go ahead and look at Kara's.
Oh,
They're really good. It's good. And not,
thanks.
again, I didn't just, not just promoting it. I am also a
Thanks.
listener. It's good stuff.
Yay.
And anyone who has listened to those episodes will understand the next question that I
Hmm.
have for you, Kara. What special skill do you possess that would make you a valuable member of a group in
Mm.
a zombie apocalypse?
I have spent an enormous amount of time thinking about this. I was obsessed with I've always been a little bit obsessed with the whole idea of apocalypse and that genre of literature. Even as a kid, I read
Mhm.
way too much of it. And then when zombies kind of came into fashion, all of the TV shows used to have nightmares about zombies a lot. I have thought about these things. I am an incredibly good problem solver. I
Okay.
am incredibly tenacious, but I am really good at looking at a range of information and
Hmm.
distilling it down to what needs to be done and then doing it. And that's something I've always been really good at. I have a terrible memory. I actually have like a post-viral syndrome myself from about 20 years ago, unfortunately, which ruined my memory. So, which is why I can't
Wow.
remember that offhand the name of the the doctor who had the study that my podcast is based on. I have all of these in notes that I can
Okay.
refer to,
Sure.
but I literally can't remember what I watched on television last week. Like it's pretty bad,
Wow.
but it's fine. So I would be able to kind of make my way through a zombie apocalypse by dealing moment, figuring out the best possible solution. I think I'm pretty good at, and also, I mean, I'm pretty good in a fight. So
Well, that's
I don't
good.
want to brag, but I do. I'm pretty good in a fight.
It's the kind of skill that works well in escape rooms as well as in poker rooms, I must say.
Yeah.
It's an important one. Good stuff. Well, before we get into our community questions portion of the show, I just want to end up with a couple more, one about your personal life and one about your outlook on the poker industry.
Okay.
So you're originally from small town northern Alberta. Where exactly, first of all?
Well, it's an area called the Peace Country, which sounds really beautiful, and it is beautiful country. The main river that runs through it is the Peace River.
Mhm.
So, but it's a town of like 500 people.
Wow,
So
that's tiny
like
for sure.
it's a farming community. I mean, obviously didn't live in the town. We lived outside of it in like our own kind of homestead. So
Okay. And since then, you've lived in London, in California, in Slovenia, and now Italy. That's a lot of amazing places. Do you ever miss the small town life of Peaceville, Canada?
I mean, I miss Canada. I really, really miss my family right now. I
Mm.
haven't seen them in a couple of years,
Sure.
mostly
Oh,
because of the
goodness.
pandemic, but also having a small child, I wasn't able to travel. So I haven't seen
Right.
them since they came and visited me when she was born. And I
Mm.
miss them. So I miss Canada, and I miss feeling Canadian, and I miss feeling a sense of kinship with the ground that I walk on,
Ooh, I
my
love that phrase. That's beautiful.
yeah, it's like my heritage, my language as well. My Italian's not fluent.
Mhm.
Yeah, like where I grew up, all of that. I do miss that. Small town life, not as much, I'll be honest. Like the town I grew up in was kind of a hellscape.
Oh,
So
good. Appropriately named Peaceville. Okay, or
yeah.
Peace River, right? Okay. Goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
I grew up outside of Peace River, not
Okay.
because Peace River was like the city. It had 6,000 people. Like it was the city. So
Okay.
yeah, we
Right.
didn't grow up there. But yeah, the town I grew up in was a bit
Wow.
of a hellscape. So I don't
Wow.
miss it at all.
Totally fair. Okay, so on the on the industry side of things, then you've been with 888 Poker since 2016.
Right.
Over the
Yeah.
last while in our industry, there's been a good amount of incomings and departures,
Yeah.
shall we say, on the
Mm.
ambassador front at numerous online poker companies like PokerStars, Party Poker,
Hmm.
GG. What are your thoughts on the current role of a poker ambassador in
Huh.
2021?
Well, I think a lot of it is the same as it's always been in that an ambassador is basically a PR and marketing role.
Mhm.
You are representing the company and the brand. You're a brand ambassador. So it's our job to reflect well on the brand that we work for, but also to kind of explain it to people to, when the new 888 poker software came out, like that was a big thing last year for us in the last few months that it came out. And so it's important for us to be making sure people have the information that they need, doing it in a way that's understandable, but recognizable, and yeah, reflecting well on the brand. And I think that 888, I mean, the team is almost unchanged.
Yeah.
We had Daria was who lives in Russia. She was an ambassador as well, and just because of the way things went, had to unfortunately leave. But we all kind of wished her well, and we're sad to see her go.
Right.
But our team is very similar to what it was a year ago.
Mhm.
It's almost exactly the same, and it's quite small. And I think there's a lot of value in that because I don't know, 888 really seems to have been investing in their ambassadors, kind of giving us roles in PR and marketing that are interesting. We're doing videos, even though we're all kind of stuck at home. We've
Right.
got the company that's saying, okay, we're going to send you guys lights, and we're going to send you the right kind of equipment, and we're going to record stuff, and we're going to fit it together, and it's going to look a little silly because we're all at home, but everybody knows that that's just the way this year is.
Right.
So yeah, I have a lot of respect for the way they've structured our team.
Well, that's good. And I again, testament, I've seen it myself. I was at that 888, I guess sort of coming full circle to the beginning of my questions. I've seen it in 888 Live, in Madrid. It really is a team. It's not just, 8 individuals who are there. There really is that team spirit, and you all know
we like each other.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good.
We really do like each other. Like we go out and do stuff. We like each other. So it's good.
Good stuff. Well, in the final segment of our show, we turn to the CardsChat community. We turn to you guys to see what questions you wanted to ask our guests. And our first question, wait, we got a lot of them. We'll go through as many as we
Cool.
can.
Okay. I know I'm verbose. I'm sorry. I'll do
No,
my
I
best to
love talking
snap
with
it
you.
up.
Like if I wasn't looking at the clock, I wouldn't realize, oh my God, how has it possibly been this time? I'm enjoying it.
Okay.
So our first question is from Shells. Thank you very much, Shells, for sending this one in. Okay, well, 1 second. I got to see your reaction. The bunny suit.
Oh my God.
Bunny suit prop bet. It was fun and memorable, even though you lost the bet. You seemed to make the most of it, and you made the best of it. How likely are you to agree to another fun prop bet with another poker personality again, or have you already done so and we're not aware of it yet?
I don't think I really have. I'm terrible at betting. I always lose. I just kind of learned early on, just stop betting. When it's funny and there's like a funny outcome possible, then I'm probably a lot more likely to do it. But I just always lose. It's so
Okay. Since most of us are sidelined from any live poker action, have you been getting your poker fix online at all over the past few months?
I've played a little bit here in Italy on the 888.it, but very little because I don't, it's hard. I don't have a lot of I don't have childcare. So that makes it kind of tough. And then I'm up really early in the morning because of that, which means I can't stay up late playing after she's asleep. So I'm kind of desperate for some, but I have played some really the really fast ones and tried to figure out how long I have before she wakes up when she was still napping.
When you say it brings me back to when my kids were really, really little. I remember that. It was that's what I used to be playing online as well. I played online maybe 3 or 4 years. And I just remember also oh, I love it. And I love playing these tournaments, but there's no way you can play a tournament when you have a child under the age of 3 years old. It's not possible.
You can't.
So I was playing Blast. Games 20 hands, 30 hands, and just,
I was doing Blast games just for the feeling of having cards in front of me virtually.
Sure. Well, the good thing is the game ain't going anywhere. It'll be there when you're ready to return.
I can't wait.
Last question from Shells is, do you think your poker playing style has changed since you've become a parent?
Oh, well, I'm worse because I don't play enough. Man, you need to play to be good at poker. You have to play, and I just don't get a chance to play. So no, I suck. Yeah, I do think I kind of sucked before because I wasn't playing enough, and now I really suck. But it's funny you say that question because I was talking to my husband about this, and there is a physiological change that happens in men. In men when they have their kids as well. Yeah. You lose testosterone for a while when you have a newborn, because that's part of the bonding process.
You get married as a man. I don't know.
Well, you definitely take a dip when you have a baby. And they've done all these studies checking it's part of the bonding process, but it does make it really hard to play poker. He was making a joke of it. He was when she was first born, I was why are these people all 3-betting me, 4-betting me? And he's Italian. So he was known for being wildly aggressive at the poker table. And all of a sudden he was what's going on? So becoming a parent definitely changes things for some people.
Nice. Next questions here are from Matt Burns 88. Thank you so much, Matt, for sending these in. Matt says, I remember you from hosting Sky Poker. What is your best memory of the show? And do you stay in contact with the other hosts like Richard Orford, TK, and Norman Pace?
You know what? I was just looking at photos of Norman Pace and his wife, Beverly, not that long ago. I used to go to a home game at their place. Norman is a comedic legend in England. A lot of people from the States or from other places might not know that, but he is an absolute legend. But I haven't spoken to him in ages. I do every once in a while talk to TK online. We'll message, we'll talk about something on Twitter, or whenever I would get a chance to see him at the World Series, he'd always come up and say hi. And it was always so nice to talk to him, but not enough. And I haven't talked to Richard Orford in so long. I can't even remember the last times.
Cool. TK, for those who don't know, it's Tony Kendall, is a great guy. If you don't go to England, he is at the World Series. I think he's always the first one in or last one out in the media room. He's definitely hardcore. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Also from Mr. Burns here, from Matt Burns, how different, this is an interesting one. They're all interesting. How different do you think being a professional poker player is for new moms compared to new dads?
Well, I think that there's a lot of physiological reasons that it's very different. It depends on, I mean, uh, physically having a baby, like going through the process
Sure.
of pregnancy and then delivery, we don't really put enough emphasis on what that actually does to a person. Like it completely changes. Like your organs are all in different places. It takes a
Hmm.
lot longer than a couple of days to bounce back from that.
Sure.
It can take months for people. For some people, it takes years to like get back
Wow.
to a place where you feel physically like yourself. And that obviously plays into sitting at a table and playing poker too. Um, and then if you're like breastfeeding or whatever, that's all going to be different. You can't sit at the table for very long. You're not going to be able to go away very long. It can be a lot easier, I think, for the non-primary parent, which tends to be the father, to go and play poker to blow off steam than it can be for the mom, unfortunately. And that carries through if you look at it societally. If you look at a lot of the research out there about who does more domestic chores in
Sure.
households where both parents work as well, it does tend to fall a lot more heavily on the woman in terms of childcare, in terms of cleaning up and domestic stuff and house management. And that takes away from your free time. So you
Yeah.
have less free time. It's harder to get away for a weekend if you're going to go play poker at a tournament or something. Like it definitely impacts that.
Yeah, well, good answer. And I like that you said tends to, because it's not everyone. I do plenty of
No,
work
not
around the
everyone.
house, right? Anyone
Yeah.
who's visited my house, they know that I do a lot of stuff. I kill
Good.
bugs, I take out the
Good.
garbage, I do a lot of dishes.
Okay.
From our next questions are from Antonis32123. Thank you, Antonis. Also, you've submitted some questions in the past, so thank you. Kara, can you share with us your top 3 highlights from hosting the Heart of Poker podcast?
I'd say one of my highlights was interviewing Maury Escandani. That one's not come out yet. So
Ooh, you
that was
got the
actually,
scoop.
yeah, that one was just last week. And I adore Maury. He is, you know, kind of a visionary, but incredibly humble. He's the man responsible, the producer for a lot of our poker, high stakes poker, World Series, Poker After Dark, all of those things. Um, and yeah, just talking to him, he was incredibly open with me.
Mm,
And we talked about him losing his father
mm,
when he had only been in the States for a couple of years, and he was basically, here by himself, and he couldn't go back to Iran where he was from, and what that was like for him. And just,
mm.
he told me about a moment of hope that kind of turned his life around after he'd lost his father, and at a time when he really needed it. And for me, it was just really powerful. And it
Wow.
kind of reminded me of moments of hope that we all need this year, whether we've lost someone. A lot of people have lost people this year, or we've just kind of lost jobs, or we've lost ourselves a little bit, like globally. I think people are working through a lot of mental health issues because of the effects of the pandemic. And so hearing him talk about this moment of clarity and moment of hope, for
Mm.
me, I was really glad that it made it onto the podcast, and I'll be glad when it gets out there because I think it's a really powerful moment. So
I
that's
can't
definitely
wait to
one of
listen.
them.
Wow.
Yeah, he's great. He's so great. Um, what else? Gosh, it's really hard to say. I've managed to talk to some really interesting people. I loved talking to David Williams. It was one of my first ones, and just he's amazing. And I worked with him at ESPN, and just the whole conversation. He's so open, and he talked about the scandal that happened in Magic: The Gathering, the
Mhm.
card game that he'd played before poker, um, and just his viewpoint on that. And I didn't expect him to bring that up. That was really interesting.
Wow.
And third, gosh, this is hard for
Well, you've
someone
given
with
us some
like
good ones already. Like
viral memory issues. Thank you. I might stop at 2 because
that's
yeah, those are 2 good ones. Let's take that.
that's fine. Let's go with those. And I can definitely after this listen to the Maury Escandani one. I can't wait to listen to
Yeah.
that. Amazing. Um, just a few more here. Okay, this is also from Antonis32123. Oh, I like this. What is the craziest wish that you have that you hope comes true for you in the next 5 years?
Wow. The craziest wish that I could think of that I would hope would come true for me in the next 5 years.
That the heater doesn't break.
Ah, yeah. Honestly, that is kind of it, I want so badly to find somewhere that feels like home.
Mm.
I really crave that. I've moved around so much in my life,
Right.
and countries and houses, and I've had something like 40 different homes in my life.
Wow. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot. And I feel a little adrift, I'll be honest. I want to find something that feels like home, but that feels like mine. So I
Mm.
have my own space. Like I have a quiet space for myself to kind of, live my life. And it's not an easy thing to do with a toddler, but that's my kind of plan for next year. Live my life the way that makes me happy and fulfilled and a better person. So I really want that. I want to find a home.
That is beautiful. And then hopefully somewhere where you don't have to record the podcast in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So that
No more toilet seats, please.
sounds
Although,
like a plan.
yeah.
We've got,
1 second. I actually have to
oh,
pick
sure.
something up off the floor. And I
Oh,
don't want it
sure.
to just disappear.
No problem.
My computer's about to go away. So I
Oh,
have to
good.
plug this back in. There we
Yep.
go. It sounds like an airplane taking off if I leave it plugged in. So I can't do that. There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, good. So we've got two more question askers left to go through here from
Okay.
Crystals. Who was your inspiration getting into poker?
I worked with someone named Nick Wellfall on that Poker Night Live show that I
I
did.
know
And
him.
he
He's a
became,
commentator,
yeah,
right?
yeah, he's a commentator. He was the commentator and I was the host of the show. And I remember when I first met him at the meeting, they brought me in because there were like 3 or 4 hosts and 3 or 4 commentators, or 5 or 6 commentators that would kind of rotate through, because we were on every night. It was a show that was on every single night through the middle of the night, looking at online poker and commentating through it
Yep.
kind of a half an hour later. So Nick had already seen the fight sports stuff that I had done on television. So he knew my work. We became friends immediately. And we used to like work it out so that all of our shifts would be together, and people used to get really mad at us. So we would always be like, we'd go out for have dinner before and have a little drink. And yeah. And he was also my poker coach. So he was there for the World Series the first year I went
Awesome.
really deep. Yeah. He was on the rail the entire time for 5 days, like a proud
Wow.
parent, but terrified because everything I did was just like, I'm having so much fun. And he's like, oh, calm down. You're going to throw it all away. So yeah.
Good stuff. What is your favorite place to travel for poker?
I used to absolutely love going to Monte Carlo because I mean, it's swanky. Even the sidewalks are made of marble, which is super slippery when it rains, by the way. It's terrible. Like it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. But I used to just love that. It was like right at the beginning of my poker career. And I used to do that for backgammon as well. We would go there.
Wow.
So I just loved that. But now definitely Vegas. I miss Vegas. I miss it so much. I miss those beautiful hotel room beds and the room service.
You're
and all
giving
my
me
friends.
FOMO. I miss it too.
I really want to go back.
I think a lot of our listeners do, unless they already live there. But yeah, definitely Vegas is calling. I miss it as well. Last couple questions here, and from our last questioner, Acid Burn FX. Thank you so. Don't you love these great names?
Great. That's awesome.
Wonderful names. 2 questions here, and then we'll wrap it up. The one thing, Kara, you would rid the earth of.
Oof, what would I rid the earth of? I mean, it's so kind of cliche to say it, but like inequality of like all the different kinds. Like if we could get rid of inequality, income inequality, racial inequality, sex inequality, like the whole world would be different. I don't even know what it would look like, to be honest, but that would be an amazing, amazing thing.
Wow.
I don't want to say like ants or something, because that just ruins the ecosystem. People, you can't do that. So
we would have accepted Brussels sprouts, by the way.
So they're awesome. Those are amazing.
Maybe if you're from Brussels, perhaps. And the last question we've got here is, what would you like to be remembered for?
That's an interesting one. I would like to be remembered. Well, for being a genuine and kind person. I try to make sure that I'm supportive of other people in the industry who are kind of coming up after me. I want to make sure that that's kind of a person that I am. I think kindness is really important. I think niceness is overrated. I do, but I think kindness is very important. So honesty. Well, yeah, because you can't really be honest and be super, super nice, because then you're more worried about people's feelings than you are about truth. So yeah, I mean, honesty and kindness, I think, would be the two things that I hope would kind of come out of my life. But who knows, man? I don't know.
Well, I
Bunny
love
costume.
it.
I mean, it's gonna be CardsChat in a bunny costume. Everybody knows that. So I can say whatever I want. Doesn't matter.
Well, I love it. And I know that I can, at least from my perspective, vouch from knowing you for a few years, that that is certainly the truth. And thanks to everyone who has sent questions in for Kara. I just got to remind everyone who's listening or who's watching, to all of our CardsChat community, we'd love to see you submit your questions for our future podcast guests. There is a dedicated thread for it in the forums. And please be sure to give us a good review on iTunes and spread the word via your social media channels if you liked the show. If you didn't like the show, then just listen again, and I'm sure you're going to like it. Kara, before we let you go, anything else you'd like to tell our listeners?
Oh, just, keep your heads up. It's not the best of years out there. Everyone's dealing with stuff, and don't feel weird if you're, struggling with it, because that's entirely normal, and it's not always going to be like this. So yeah, we're all going to be back playing poker again, not that far away from now. And that's something to look forward to. So, and thank you also for requesting that I come on, because I think your community is awesome and I love interacting with it. So yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Amen. Well, thank you, Kara. Appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in once again to another episode of CardsChat. I'm Robbie Strazynski. You can follow me on Twitter @CardPlayerLife. I wish you all a wonderful day.